Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku had a hardening but better than Red Riot. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. Pain is usually the first teacher a child encounters. It teaches you not to touch the hot stove, not to run with scissors, and not to antagonize the neighborhood bully. Pain is the biological signal that you are fragile, that the world is hard, and that you must yield to survive. Izuku Midoriya never learned that lesson. It wasn't for a lack of trying on the world's part. The lesson simply refused to stick. The memory was vivid, burned into his mind not by the sensation of heat, but by the smell of it, caramelized sugar and ozone. The scent of nitroglycerin. He was 4 years old, standing in a sandbox that had seen better days, his red sneakers planted firmly in the loose grit. Behind him, a trembling boy clutched a bruised knee. In front of him stood Katsuki Bakugo, flanked by his 2 lackeys. Katsuki's palms were popping with small, starburst explosions, a grin of malicious delight stretching across his face. "You really think you can play hero, Deku?" Katsuki sneered, his red eyes narrowing. "You don't even have a quirk. You're just a pebble in my way." "Stop it, Kaken!" Izuku cried out, his voice wavering, tears pricking at the corners of his large green eyes. He raised his fists in a shaky guard, imitating the stance of All Might he'd seen on television 1,000 times. I won't let you hurt him anymore." Katsuki's grin vanished, replaced by a scowl of irritation. He hated defiance. He hated weakness. And to him, Izuku was the epitome of both. "Then I guess I'll just have to crush you," Katsuki declared. He lunged. It was a clumsy, telegraphed move typical of a 4-year-old, but it was backed by a volatile superpower. Katsuki swung his right arm, his palm connecting squarely with Izuku's left shoulder. Boom! The explosion was loud enough to silence the cicadas buzzing in the nearby trees. Smoke billowed out, obscuring the 2 boys. The lackeys laughed, expecting to see Izuku on the ground crying, clutching a burn mark. Katsuki expected it too. He expected the scream. He expected the smell of singed fabric and the satisfaction of dominance. But there was no scream. As the gray smoke drifted away in the summer breeze, the laughter died in the throats of the other children. Izuku was still standing. He hadn't moved an inch. His feet had sunk slightly deeper into the sand, but his posture hadn't shifted. Katsuki blinked, confusion warring with his aggression. He looked at his own hand, smoke trailing from his fingers, and then at Izuku's shoulder. The fabric of Izuku's t-shirt was incinerated, leaving a ragged hole. But the skin beneath wasn't pink or blistered. It wasn't skin at all. From the base of his neck down to his elbow, Izuku's flesh had transformed. It was a deep, lustrous black, shimmering with an oil-slick iridescence under the sun. It looked like obsidian, or perhaps a polished diamond that had swallowed all the light around it. It looked heavy. Izuku blinked, his tears pausing in sheer surprise. He looked at his shoulder. He poked it. It made a dull clink sound, like tapping a coin against a steel beam. It doesn't hurt," Izuku whispered, his voice filled with wonder. Katsuki stared, his eyes widening. "What? I have a quirk," Izuku breathed, a smile breaking through his tear-stained face. He looked up at Katsuki, beaming. "Kaken! Look! I have a quirk." Katsuki took a step back, a visceral, unfamiliar feeling curling in his gut. He tried to process what he was seeing. He had hit Izuku with his best shot. He had wanted to hurt him, and Izuku had just stood there, turning into something else. "Don't mock me!" Katsuki screamed, insecurity flaring into rage. He wound up his other arm and let loose a larger explosion, aiming right for Izuku's face. Izuku flinched instinctively, squeezing his eyes shut. The black substance rippled instantly, spreading from his shoulder up his neck and across his face in a fraction of a second. Bang! The force of the explosion washed over him. But again, Izuku didn't budge. The only thing that happened was a heavy, grinding sound as Izuku's increased density cracked the asphalt beneath the sand of the playground. Katsuki stared at his hand. His wrist hurt from the recoil. It felt like he had punched a solid steel wall. Izuku opened his eyes. The black armor receded, fading back into soft, freckled skin. He looked at Katsuki, hope shining in his eyes. We can be heroes together now, Kaken. Katsuki didn't smile. He looked at Izuku, this boy he had looked down on, this boy who was supposed to be a pebble, and realized that pebbles don't break. You kick them, and you hurt your toe. That day, the dynamic didn't change, but the texture of it did. Bakugo didn't stop bullying Izuku. If anything, he became relentless. But he didn't bully Izuku because he was fragile. He bullied him because Izuku was the one thing in the world Katsuki couldn't destroy. The doctor called it adamant. A mutation of the epidermal and muscular systems allowing for instantaneous molecular condensation. Izuku could convert kinetic energy and stress into density. The harder you hit him, the harder he became. Izuku Midoriya wasn't a pebble. He was the immovable object waiting for an unstoppable force. 10 years later, the afternoon sun baked the interior of Aldera Junior High, turning the classroom into a stifling oven of teenage hormones and boredom. The teacher, a man who looked like he'd given up on his own dreams a decade ago, slapped a stack of papers against his desk. Since you're all third years, it's time to think seriously about your futures, he droned. I would pass out these career aptitude forms, but... He snatched the papers up and threw them into the air with a theatrical flourish. Why bother? I know you all want to go into the hero course. The class erupted. Hands turned into drills, eyes popped out of sockets, and minor telekinesis sent pencils floating. It was a display of minor powers, a chaotic celebration of individuality. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks, the teacher said, calming them down. But remember, public quirk usage is against the law. Keep it in your pants, folks. Hey, teach! The voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet up on his desk, leaning back with an arrogance that sucked the air out of the room. Don't lump me in with these extras. I'm not just aiming for UA High. I'm going to surpass All Might and become the top hero. These guys will be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some D-lister. The class broke into angry murmurs, jeering at Bakugo's ego. Oh, right, the teacher said, glancing at his clipboard, ignoring the tension. Bakugo is aiming for UA. And oh, that's interesting. Midoriya is applying too. The room went dead silent. Every head turned. Izuku sat near the back, his head down, scribbling furiously in a notebook labeled Hero Analysis for the future number 13. He froze as he felt the weight of 30 gazes. Then, the laughter started. It wasn't the malicious laughter of people mocking a quirkless loser. It was the incredulous laughter of people who knew exactly what Izuku's quirk was. Midoriya? The wall? One student cackled. Dude, UA? Really? You gonna just stand there and let the villains tire themselves out? Another jeered. The entrance exam has robots, man. You gonna hug them to death? Izuku shrank in his seat. I've been training, he muttered, though no one was listening. Defensive heroes are important too. Slam. An explosion rocked the room. Bakugo was out of his seat and in front of Izuku's desk in the blink of an eye. His palms smoked, pressed flat against the wood of Izuku's desk. Deku, Bakugo growled, his voice dropping an octave. Izuku looked up. He didn't flinch. He hadn't flinched in years. Kaken, you think you can stand on the same stage as me? Bakugo hissed, sparks flying from his palms. You're nothing but a sandbag. You don't have an attack. You don't have speed. You just sit there. I can save people, Izuku said quietly. I can be a shield. A shield? Bakugo roared. He swung his right arm, a vicious hook aimed directly at Izuku's temple. The class gasped, some looking away. Clang. The sound wasn't flesh on flesh. It was the sound of a sledgehammer hitting an anvil. Bakugo's fist connected with Izuku's face. But Izuku's head didn't snap back. His skin had flashed into that familiar, deep obsidian hue the moment before impact. The force of the explosion washed over Izuku's armored skin, dissipating harmlessly. The shockwave, however, shattered the desk Izuku was sitting at. Wood splinters flew, and the metal legs of the chair buckled under the sudden, massive increase in Izuku's weight. Izuku crashed to the floor amidst the debris, sitting heavily in the ruins of his furniture, completely unharmed. Smoke rose from his blackened face. Slowly, the black receded, revealing unblemished skin and a sad expression. Bakugo stood over him, clutching his own wrist, his teeth gritted. His hand was shaking. Punching Izuku always hurt. It was like punching a mountain. You're just a glorified paperweight, Bakugo spat, nursing his hand. Don't even think about taking the exam. You'll just clog up the works. He turned and marched back to his seat, kicking a piece of the broken desk as he went. Izuku sighed, picking himself up. The floor tiles where he had landed were cracked in a spiderweb pattern. He muttered a quiet apology to the terrified student at the next desk and began gathering his things. This was his reality. He had a quirk that made him invincible, but to society, he was useless. In a world of flashy lasers, giant transformations, and elemental control, being a human doorstop wasn't enough. Heroes needed to defeat villains. Heroes needed to win, and Izuku Midoriya couldn't win. He could only not lose. School let out, and the humidity outside felt oppressive. Izuku walked alone, taking the long route to avoid Bakugo's usual entourage. He clutched his scorched notebook to his chest. Bakugo had tried to blow it up earlier, but Izuku had hardened his hands in time to smother the explosion, saving the paper, though the cover was a bit singed. He walked through the quieter streets, muttering to himself, "If I focus on rescue ops, maybe, disaster zones. Falling debris wouldn't hurt me. I could hold up collapsing buildings. But my mobility is trash. When I harden, I get heavy. I sink in water. I crack the ground. I'm too slow." He turned into an underpass, the shadows providing a brief respite from the sun. Maybe I should focus on support items? Something to increase propulsion? But the G-force required to move my hardened mass would be lethal to a normal. A gurgling sound interrupted his muttering. Izuku stopped. The manhole cover a few meters in front of him rattled. Suddenly, sludge exploded from the sewer. It was a dark, viscous green fluid, swirling with malice. Two large, yellow eyes formed in the muck, a medium-sized invisibility cloak. The sludge hissed, a voice that sounded like raw sewage draining down a pipe. Izuku froze. A villain? Here? The sludge lunged. It moved with terrifying speed, a tidal wave of filth. Izuku didn't have time to run. He did the only thing he could do. He braced, adamant. The transformation was instantaneous. His skin, his clothes, his hair, everything turned into the dark, organic metal. His density skyrocketed. His feet crunched through the concrete of the tunnel floor, anchoring him into the bedrock. The sludge slammed into him. To the villain, it must have felt like crashing into a bollard. The fluid rushed around him, engulfing him, but failing to knock him over. Izuku stood firm, a statue in the tide. "What is this?" the villain gurgled. "Hard? No matter. I'll just force my way in." The sludge swarmed over Izuku's face, seeking entry. The nose, the mouth. The villain forced himself into Izuku's nostrils and throat. "You can't breathe if I'm inside you, kid. Just let me take over your body and it'll be easier." Izuku couldn't breathe. Panic flared in his chest. He tried to claw at the sludge, his hardened fingers tearing through the liquid, but it just reformed. He couldn't punch water. The villain pushed deeper, trying to slide down Izuku's windpipe to possess him from the inside out. "Think, Izuku. Harden." Izuku focused inward. It was a technique he had practiced for years to avoid internal injuries from Bakugo's heavier blasts. He hardened his mucous membranes. He hardened his trachea. He hardened the lining of his lungs. His insides turned to steel. The villain hit a wall inside Izuku's throat. He pushed, squeezed, and surged, but Izuku's windpipe was now a rigid, impenetrable pipe. The villain couldn't expand to take control. He couldn't fuse with the tissue because the tissue was harder than diamond. "What the hell are you?" the villain shrieked, frustration mounting. "Why won't you let me in?" Izuku was suffocating. He couldn't inhale. But because his body was currently in a state of suspended metabolic stasis, a side effect of full-body hardening, his oxygen consumption had dropped to near zero. He could hold this state for minutes. It was a stalemate. The villain couldn't kill him. Izuku couldn't escape. Minutes ticked by like hours. Izuku's vision began to blur at the edges. Even in his hardened state, he needed oxygen eventually. The villain was thrashing, trying to pry Izuku's mouth open wider, trying to find any weakness, any soft spot. There were none. Die. Just die already. The villain roared. Clang. The manhole cover flew into the air, spinning like a coin. Have no fear. A booming voice echoed through the tunnel, vibrating against Izuku's metallic eardrums. For I am here. A blur of blonde and red muscle flashed into the tunnel. All Might. The villain shrieked in terror. All Might. No! He tried to use Izuku as a hostage, swinging a tendril of sludge to smash Izuku against the tunnel wall. Izuku hit the concrete wall. The wall shattered. Izuku didn't even feel it. All Might paused for a microsecond, surprised that the hostage hadn't gone splat. He saw the glistening black form of the boy, Texas. Smash! The punch didn't hit Izuku. It hit the air pressure around them. The wind pressure was immense, a hurricane contained in a tunnel. The sludge villain was blown apart. The liquid scattered, splattering against the walls and ceiling. Izuku, caught in the slipstream, was knocked backward. His heavy, hardened feet dragged deep furrows into the ground as he slid, slowing himself down before he tumbled. As the wind died down, Izuku gasped. The sludge was gone from his throat. He released his quirk. The black armor faded, leaving him heaving for air on his hands and knees. Are you all right, young man? Izuku looked up. Standing there, bathed in the dim light of the underpass, was his idol. The symbol of peace. All Might. All am might. Izuku squeaked, scrambling backward. Apologies for getting you caught up in my justice ing. All Might laughed, his signature pose striking a silhouette against the tunnel exit. But you were a tough nut to crack. That villain couldn't make a dent in you. All Might was busy scooping up the scattered bits of the villain into empty soda bottles. Izuku watched, mesmerized. He wanted to ask for an autograph, to ask a million questions. Hey! Wait! Izuku scrambled up as All Might prepared to jump away. Please! I have to ask you something. No time! Evil waits for no one. All Might crouched, his legs tensing. Wait! Izuku lunged. He grabbed onto All Might's cargo pants. All Might jumped. Usually, All Might would soar through the air with the grace of a bird. But today, he felt a sudden, massive drag. It felt like he was towing a wrecking ball. Whoa! All Might looked down. Izuku was clinging to his leg, his skin partially hardened around his hands to maintain his grip against the wind pressure. The extra weight was throwing off All Might's trajectory. Let go, kid! You're heavy. If I let go, I'll die. I can't fly. Izuku screamed, the wind flapping his cheeks. Right. Good point. All Might wrestled with the flight path, landing heavily on the roof of a nearby building. The impact cracked the roof surface more than usual, thanks to Izuku's density. Izuku rolled onto the gravel roof, dizzy and shaking. That was reckless, All Might chastised, though he looked exhausted. Steam was beginning to rise from his body. Bang on the door, someone will let you in. I have to go. Wait! Izuku yelled, standing up. One question. Just one. All Might paused. Izuku clenched his fists at his sides. He looked at the ground, then up at the hero's back. I have a quirk. It's called adamant. I can survive anything. I can take explosions, falling buildings, bullets. But that's all I can do. He took a shaky breath. I'm slow. I'm heavy. I can't punch hard, I can't shoot fire. Everyone says I'm just a sandbag. Can someone like me, who can only defend, ever be a hero like you? Can I save people if all I can do is not die? The silence stretched. Izuku waited for the answer. Yes, of course. Heroes come in all forms. But the answer didn't come. Instead, a puff of steam exploded from All Might. When the smoke cleared, the muscle-bound giant was gone. In his place stood a skeletal, emaciated man with sunken eyes, coughing up blood. Izuku screamed. An imposter? No, the man wheezed, sitting down heavily. It's me, All Might explained. The injury. The time limit. The respiratory system that was half destroyed. He lifted his shirt to show the scar, a gruesome, twisted mass of purple and red tissue that looked like a spiderweb of agony. 5 years ago, All Might said softly. A villain did this. Half my respiratory organs were destroyed. My stomach was removed. I've wasted away from the surgeries. Izuku stared in horror. The symbol of peace was broken. Pro-heroes are always risking their lives, All Might said, looking Izuku in the eye. Some villains just can't be beaten without power. I see your quirk. It's impressive. Durable. But, a hero has to do more than just survive, kid. You have to win. You have to save them quickly. If you're just a shield, what happens when the villain ignores you and kills the hostage? Izuku felt his heart crack. It hurt more than any punch Bakugo had ever thrown. I see, Izuku whispered. There's no shame in being a police officer, All Might offered gently, standing up and heading for the roof access door. They get a lot of flack because the heroes capture the villains, but it's a fine profession. All Might opened the door. It's good to dream, young man. But you have to be realistic. The door clicked shut. Izuku stood alone on the roof. The wind ruffled his hair. He looked at his hands, hands that could turn into diamond, hands that could shatter steel, but hands that, apparently, couldn't hold a dream. Izuku walked home in a daze. The world felt gray. He had been rejected by the one person whose opinion mattered. Be realistic. Maybe Kaken was right. Maybe he was just a pebble. A very hard, annoying pebble. He turned a corner onto the main shopping district street. He heard explosions. He saw smoke. His feet stopped. Don't go, his brain said. You're not a hero. But his legs moved anyway. He pushed through the crowd of onlookers. The scene was chaos. The street was on fire. Cars were overturned. And in the center of the inferno was the sludge villain. It's that guy from the tunnel! Someone yelled. Where's All Might? He dropped the villain. It's his fault. Izuku's stomach dropped. He dropped it because of me. Because I grabbed his leg. The heroes were standing back. Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Empty Lady, none of them could get close. The fire was too intense, the villain too slippery. And the villain had a hostage. Izuku squinted through the smoke. In the middle of the slime, thrashing and screaming, was a boy with ash blonde hair. Kaken. Katsuki was unleashing explosions like a wild animal, but they were doing nothing but feeding the fire around them. The slime was suffocating him, forcing itself down his throat just like it had done to Izuku. Izuku saw Katsuki's eyes. They weren't angry. They were terrified. They were pleading for help. Be realistic. No, Izuku whispered. The realization hit him like a lightning bolt. Kaken is going to die. The heroes were waiting for someone with the right quirk. They were waiting for a specialized counter. They were being realistic. And while they were being realistic, Katsuki was dying. Izuku didn't think. He didn't weigh the pros and cons. He didn't calculate his lack of mobility. He ran. Hey! Come back, kid! You'll get killed! Death Arms shouted. Izuku ignored him. He sprinted toward the inferno. The sludge villain saw him coming. You again? The hard one? Stay back. The villain lashed out with a massive tentacle of slime, swinging it like a whip. Harden. Izuku didn't dodge. He couldn't. He ran straight into the attack. His skin flashed black. The slime whip slammed into his chest with enough force to overturn a car. Izuku grunted, his feet skidding on the pavement, but he didn't stop. He used the momentum, leaning into the blow, and smashed through the tentacle. He was a cannonball. The fire licked at his skin. Normal skin would boil instantly. Izuku's adamant form absorbed the thermal energy, his black skin glowing a faint, dull red as it heated up. It was uncomfortable, like wearing a wool sweater in a sauna, but it wasn't burning him. Not yet. He reached the center. Kaken! Bakugo's eyes widened. Deku? He gurgled. The villain shrieked. I won't let you go. He's my new suit. The villain unleashed a barrage of explosions using Bakugo's quirk against Izuku. Boom. 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 Izuku tanked them all. He shielded his eyes with a forearm, wading through the blasts like a man walking against a strong wind. He was the wall that walked. He reached the slime mass. He grabbed the sludge with his hardened hands. Let him go! Izuku roared. He plunged his hands into the muck. He couldn't pull Bakugo out. The suction was too strong, and Izuku didn't have super strength, just super density. So, Izuku did the only thing he knew how to do. He made himself an obstacle. He lunged forward, jamming his entire body between the main mass of the villain and Bakugo's face. He forced his arms into the slime, creating a rigid, unbreakable cage around Bakugo's head. Breath, Kaken! Izuku yelled. He expanded his chest, hardening his ribs, forcing the slime back purely by occupying the space. He became a physical barrier, a wedge driven into the villain's fluid body. Get out of my way! The villain screamed. He tried to crush Izuku. He squeezed with the pressure of a hydraulic press. Izuku's armor groaned. The sound of grinding metal screeched through the fire. The pressure was immense. If he relaxed for a second, he would be crushed into paste. But he didn't relax. He looked at Bakugo, who was coughing, sucking in greedy gulps of air within the safety of Izuku's arms. Why? Bakugo wheezed, staring at Izuku's face, which was inches from his own, the skin black and shining like a beetle's shell. Why are you here, my legs? Izuku gritted his teeth, straining against the crushing weight of the villain. They moved on their own. You looked like you needed help. The villain raised a massive glob of slime high into the air, hardening it by compressing the fluid, aiming to smash both boys flat into the concrete. I'll crush you both. Izuku looked up. He couldn't move. He was anchoring Bakugo. He braced himself for the impact, hoping his spine would hold. I just need to hold on. Just a little longer. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. I really am pathetic, a voice growled. Blood sprayed as All Might forced his transformation, pushing past his limit. He appeared in the flames, steam rising off his massive frame. I told you to be realistic, All Might shouted, grabbing Izuku's arm and Bakugo's shirt. But I wasn't practicing what I preached. A pro should always risk his life. Detroit. Smash! The punch changed the weather. The updraft created a whirlwind that scattered the flames, vaporized the sludge villain, and sent a column of rain clouds into the sky. Izuku felt the weight vanish. He unhardened, his body instantly feeling light and jelly-like from exhaustion. He collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for air. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights and scoldings. The pro heroes were furious with Izuku. That was suicide. Kamui Woods yelled. You have a defensive quirk, sure, but you have no offense. If All Might hadn't shown up, you'd be a statue in that villain's stomach forever. But Death Arms grunted, crossing his massive arms. I gotta admit, kid. You took hits that would have killed me. That's some serious durability. On the other side, the heroes were praising Bakugo for his bravery and his powerful quirk. It felt unfair, but Izuku was used to unfair. As the crowd dispersed and the sun began to set, Izuku started the walk home. He felt drained. His muscles ached, a deep, cellular ache that came from holding his hardened form for too long. Deku! Izuku turned. Katsuki was running after him. He looked disheveled, soot smearing his face. He stopped a few feet away, panting. He looked furious. I didn't ask for your help. Katsuki shouted. And you didn't save me. I was fine. You just got in the way. You're just a rock. A useless, hard rock. Don't look down on me. He turned and stomped away. Izuku smiled wryly. At least he's consistent. I am here. Izuku jumped out of his skin. All Might zoomed out from a side alley, sliding to a halt in his muscle form before instantly deflating into his skeletal form in a puff of blood. All Might? Young Midoriya, All Might said, wiping blood from his mouth. I have a proposal for you. Izuku blinked. A proposal? I watched you today, All Might said, his voice serious. While the other heroes stood back and calculated the odds, you ran in. You, the boy with no offensive power. You threw yourself into danger to save a life. All Might placed a hand on his chest. Most top heroes have stories from their school days. And most of them have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they could think. Izuku's eyes welled up. You told me you were just a shield, All Might continued. You asked if you could be a hero. I gave you the wrong answer. All Might smiled, the gaunt face looking truly heroic. You are unbreakable, young Midoriya. Not just your body, but your spirit. You can become a hero. Izuku fell to his knees, clutching his chest, sobbing into the pavement. It was the first time anyone had told him that, but All Might said, holding up a finger. To be a top hero, you need more than just defense. You need power. And I have the solution. All Might explained the secret of his quirk. One for all. A power passed down from generation to generation, stockpiling strength. It is a torch, All Might said. And I am looking for a successor. Me? Izuku whispered. But why me? Because, All Might said, looking at Izuku's tear-stained face. This power, it is immense. If I gave it to an unprepared body, their limbs would explode. The sheer force would tear a normal human apart from the inside. All Might walked over and placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. He squeezed. It felt solid. I have been looking for a vessel, All Might said. Someone with the heart of a hero. Usually, I would have to spend years training their body to withstand the recoil of One for All. All Might grinned. But you are different. Your quirk, Adamant, allows you to endure physical stress that would kill anyone else. You are a living fortress. You are the only person I have ever met who might be able to take this power, and not break. He extended his hand. Izuku Midoriya. You are the perfect vessel. Will you accept my power? Izuku looked at the hand. He looked at his own hand, the hand that had turned to black steel to save Kaken. He imagined that hand, not just hard, but strong. Capable of punching back. Capable of winning. He wiped his eyes. He stood up. Yes, Izuku said, his voice trembling but firm. I'll do it. All Might laughed, a genuine, hearty sound. Good. Then tomorrow, the real training begins. You're already a tank, kid. Now let's put a cannon on you. Izuku smiled. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a pebble. He felt like a foundation. And on that foundation, he was going to build the greatest hero the world had ever seen. The sun was just beginning to crest over the horizon, casting a pale, washed-out light over Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. The place was a graveyard of human consumption, a sprawling, rusting monument to neglect. Mountains of tires, rotting appliances, and driftwood choked the sand, leaving only narrow, treacherous paths to the water. In the center of a clearing surrounded by teetering towers of trash, All Might stood in his deflated, skeletal form. He wore a baggy white t-shirt that hung off his bony frame like a shroud. Opposite him stood Izuku Midoriya, vibrating with a mixture of adrenaline and terror. So, Izuku stammered, his notebook clutched to his chest. You said I'm the perfect vessel? Indeed, All Might said, his voice grave but his eyes twinkling. He sat on a discarded refrigerator, the metal groaning slightly under even his reduced weight. Let me explain the nature of One for All. It is not simply super strength. It is power, stockpiled power, passed down from one generation to the next, growing like a snowball rolling down a mountain. All Might held up a hand, clenching it into a fist. When a normal person receives this power, their body is like a glass cup. If you pour a gallon of water into a shot glass, what happens? It overflows, Izuku answered instantly. Worse, All Might corrected. The glass shatters under the pressure. If I were to give One for All to someone with a standard physiology, even a strong one, and they tried to use 100% of its power, their limbs would explode. Muscles would tear, bones would turn to powder. It requires years of physical conditioning just to hold the lid on the jar. He pointed a long, bony finger at Izuku. But you, young Midoriya, are not a glass cup. You are a vault. Your quirk, Adamant, allows you to alter your molecular density on a whim. You instinctively harden to absorb kinetic energy. One for All is kinetic energy. Izuku's eyes widened as the logic clicked into place. He pulled out a pen and began muttering, scribbling furiously. So, the internal backlash of OFA functions similarly to an external impact. If I harden my internal muscle fibers and skeletal structure, the force that would usually destroy the user is instead absorbed by the density of the adamant form, effectively negating the recoil damage. Exactly. All Might boomed, coughing up a small spray of blood immediately after. You don't need to spend 3 years building muscle mass just to survive the transfer. Your body is already built to survive a train wreck. You can take the power now. Izuku stopped writing. He looked up, his heart hammering against his ribs. Now? All Might stood up. He reached up and plucked a long, golden strand of hair from his head. He held it out, the hair glinting in the morning light. One for all must be transferred through DNA ingestion, All Might said solemnly. His face shadowed, looking like a comic book panel come to life. Eat this. Izuku stared at the hair. He stared at All Might. Huh! Eat it! The taste of the hair was irrelevant compared to what followed. For the first hour, nothing happened. Izuku sat on the beach, staring at his hands, waiting to explode or glow or feel something. It takes time to digest, All Might explained, leaning against a rusted truck. It usually takes a few hours for the power to integrate with your bioelectric field. Then it hit. It wasn't a spark. It wasn't a buzz. It felt like someone had hooked a high-voltage cable directly into Izuku's spine. He gasped, his back arching as a surge of raw, thrumming power flooded his veins. The sand beneath his feet shifted as he convulsed. Breathe, young Midoriya. All Might coached. Don't fight it. Let it fill the spaces. Izuku gritted his teeth. The power was wild. It wanted to tear out of him. He could feel his bones creaking, the familiar warning sign of stress that usually preceded a fracture. Harden. It was instinct. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut and activated his quirk. A metallic shinning sound echoed across the beach. Izuku's skin turned a deep, glossy obsidian. His shirt tightened as his muscle mass condensed and expanded simultaneously. The wild, chaotic energy of One for All slammed into the internal walls of his adamant form, and the walls held. The pain vanished instantly. Instead of feeling like he was being torn apart, Izuku felt heavy. Unbelievably heavy. The energy of One for All was being trapped inside his hardened shell, compressing, building density to a level he had never felt before. He opened his eyes. They were glowing with a faint, green lightning that crackled around his darkened skin. Incredible, All Might whispered, watching the boy. He didn't break. He didn't even bruise. Izuku looked at his hands. They looked like the hands of a statue carved from the night sky. He took a step. Crack. His foot didn't just sink into the sand. It smashed through the compacted layer of trash beneath it, shattering a buried concrete slab. He sank up to his knee. Izuku's voice was deeper, resonating metallically from his hardened throat. I'm stuck. All Might burst out laughing. You certainly are. And that brings us to your training. All Might transformed into his buff form, flexing his biceps. You have the vessel, Izuku. But a tank without an engine is just a bunker. Your adamant form gets heavier the denser you become, correct? Yes, Izuku said, struggling to pull his leg out of the ground. When I absorb kinetic energy, I convert it to mass. Since One for All is constant energy, I'm constantly absorbing it. Exactly. You are now permanently carrying the weight of the world's strongest power. All Might grinned. If you want to be a hero, you can't just be a wall. You have to be a moving wall. We have 10 months until the UA entrance exam. We aren't going to build your durability. That's already maxed out. We are going to build your mobility. The training montage. The next 10 months were hell, but not the kind of hell Izuku had expected. He didn't drag tires to build muscle. He didn't do push-ups until his arms fell off. He was already strong enough to lift a car when hardened, simply due to the hydraulic density of his muscles. His problem was physics. Newton's second law. All Might yelled from atop a pile of trash. Force equals mass times acceleration. You have the mass. You have the force. But if you don't master the vector, you're just going to dig a hole to China. Izuku stood at the edge of the water, his body gleaming black. He was trying to run. Every step was a disaster. He pushed off with One for All at 5%, and his foot shattered the asphalt of the sidewalk. He tried to pivot, and his momentum carried him straight through a rusted lamppost. He was a bull in a china shop, but the china shop was the entire world. Control the output. All Might instructed. You're using 100% of your hardening because you're scared of the power. But that makes you weigh half a ton. Try to oscillate. This was the key. Izuku had to learn a terrifying dance. He had to learn to soften his joints for a split second to allow for fluid movement. Then harden them instantly upon impact or push off to handle the force of one for all. It required surgical precision. Month 3. Izuku was hopping between piles of trash. He looked like a black blur. Soft harden jump. He landed on a washing machine. Harden absorbed soft spring. He launched off it. The washing machine was crushed flat like a soda can, but Izuku soared through the air. Better! All Might called out. But you're still leaving craters. A hero saves the city, he doesn't destroy the pavement. Month 6. They introduced impact recall. All Might threw a refrigerator at Izuku. Izuku didn't just block it. He caught it, hardened his arms to absorb the shock, spun with the momentum, and used one for all to hurl it back. The fridge flew 300 meters out to sea. Good! All Might yelled. But you sank 3 inches into the dirt. Widen your stance. Distribute the load. Month 9. The beach was clean. Not because they had picked up the trash, but because Izuku had effectively pulverized most of it during his mobility drills or moved it in massive bulk loads. Izuku stood in the center of the pristine sand. He took a deep breath. Green lightning flickered around him. He didn't harden his whole body. Just his legs. Boom! He vanished. A split second later, he appeared 50 meters away, skidding to a halt, the sand fusing into glass beneath his boots from the friction. I did it, Izuku panted, unhardening. Full cowl. Adamant hybrid. All Might looked at the boy. Izuku had grown. His shoulders were broader, his posture confident. He wasn't the trembling twig he had been a year ago. He was a young man made of iron. You're ready, All Might said, pride swelling in his chest. You're not just a vessel anymore, Izuku. You're a weapon of peace. The entrance exam. The gates of UA High towered over the students, gleaming in the sunlight. To most, they were intimidating. To Izuku, they just looked like metal. And metal was something he understood. He adjusted the straps of his yellow backpack, taking a deep breath. He wasn't wearing his middle school uniform. He wore a sturdy green track suit he had bought specifically for today. Ordinary fabric tended to tear when he changed shape. Out of my way, Deku. Izuku stiffened, but he didn't cower. He turned to see Katsuki Bakugo slouching toward him, hands in his pockets. Kaken, Izuku nodded. Bakugo stopped. He eyed Izuku up and down. There was a difference in the nerd. He didn't smell like fear anymore. He smelled like ozone and heavy oil. Don't think just because you stopped a slime villain you're hot stuff, Bakugo growled, though the bite was slightly less venomous than usual. You're still just a rock. Rocks sink. I learned how to skip stones, Izuku replied calmly. Bakugo's eyes narrowed. He scoffed, shoving past Izuku. We'll see. Izuku watched him go, then turned back to the gate. He took a step forward, his foot catching on a slightly raised brick. In the past, he would have flailed and fallen. Today, he stumbled, his center of gravity shifting. Whoa! Careful! A hand touched his backpack. Suddenly, Izuku felt a strange sensation. The omnipresent weight of his own density vanished. He felt like a balloon. He floated upward, his legs pedaling in the air. Oh! Sorry! I used my quirk on you. A girl with a round face and rosy cheeks grabbed his wrist and pulled him back down to earth. She pressed her fingertips together. Release! Gravity returned instantly. Izuku hit the ground. Thud. It was a heavy sound. Much heavier than a boy of his size should make. The pavement cracked slightly under his sneakers. The girl blinked, looking at the crack, then at Izuku. Whoa, you're heavy! Do you have weights in your bag? Izuku blushed, rubbing the back of his neck. Something like that. My quirk makes me dense. Thanks for catching me. I'm Ochako Uraraka. She beamed. Good luck. Let's do our best. She ran off toward the orientation hall. Izuku watched her go, a small smile touching his lips. He checked the pavement crack, wincing guiltily, and hurried inside. The orientation. The auditorium was dark, lit only by the spotlight on present Mike. The voice hero was screaming about yeah. And are you ready? Izuku sat quietly, muttering analysis under his breath as Mike explained the robots. The 1-pointer is fast but fragile. The 2-pointer has defense. The 3-pointer is heavy artillery. Excuse me, A tall boy with glasses and blue hair shot up from his seat, his hand chopping the air like a blade. May I ask a question? The pamphlet says there are 4 types of villains, but you have only explained 3. If this is an error, it is highly shameful for you. The boy spun around, pointing a finger directly at Izuku. And you? The one with the curly hair. Izuku pointed at himself. Me? You've been muttering this entire time. It's distracting. If you're here to make noise, please leave, the auditorium snickered. Izuku felt the heat rise in his cheeks, but he didn't shrink away. He stood up. I was calculating the kinetic force required to penetrate the armor plating of a 3-pointer based on its silhouette, Izuku said, his voice carrying clearly without shouting. Standard steel alloy would require roughly 40,000 newtons of force. I was just checking if I needed to use 5% or 8%. Silence fell over the room. The boy with glasses stared, his mouth slightly open. He adjusted his glasses. I see. You are analyzing the enemy. My apologies. He sat down. President Mike cleared his throat. All right. Dig that enthusiasm. As for the 4th robot, that's the 0-pointer. It's just an obstacle. Think of it like a thwomp from Mario. If you see it, run away. Izuku narrowed his eyes. Run away? Or endure? Battle Center B. The mock city was enormous. Skyscrapers, streets, cars. It was a perfect replica of an urban war zone. Izuku stood at the gate, stretching his hamstrings. He wore a simple tank top and reinforced cargo pants. He could feel the eyes on him. Some were mocking, remembering the boy who got scolded at the orientation. Others were curious. Hey, the glasses boy, Ida, approached him. I see you aren't wearing any support gear. Are you confident? My body is the gear, Izuku said, tightening his shoelaces. Start. President Mick's voice blared from the tower. There are no countdowns in real battles. Go! 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 The other examinees hesitated for a split second, but Izuku moved. He didn't sprint like a runner. He launched. Green lightning crackled around his legs. His skin flashed black. Boom! He exploded off the starting line, leaving a cloud of dust and broken concrete. He wasn't the fastest. Ida zoomed past him with his engines, but he was a juggernaut. He turned a corner and found a 1-pointer. The robot locked onto him, its red eye glowing. Target acquired. It lunged, a mechanical arm swinging for Izuku's head. Izuku didn't dodge. He didn't even slow down. Adamant, 100%. OFA, 5% brace. The robot's metal fist connected with Izuku's face. Clang. The robot's arm crumpled like aluminum foil. The metal bent backward, servos snapping. Izuku's head hadn't moved. He looked at the robot, his eyes glowing green from within his obsidian mask. My turn. He didn't punch. He simply lowered his shoulder and tackled. With the density of a tank and the propulsion of one for all, Izuku drove his shoulder through the robot's chassis. He tore through the metal torso, emerging out the back covered in oil and wires. The robot exploded behind him. 6 points, Izuku muttered, unhardening his face to breathe. He ran deeper into the city. The exam was a chaotic blur. Izuku found that his lack of top-tier agility was a problem. Students with range quirks, lasers, naval beams, acid, were stealing kills before he could close the distance. I need to be faster, he gritted his teeth. More power. He rounded a corner and saw a 3-pointer, a massive tracked vehicle with missile launchers. It was cornering a student who was frozen in fear. Die. The robot synthesized. It fired 3 missiles. The student screamed. Izuku jumped. He landed in front of the student. Adamant, full cowl. The missiles hit Izuku's chest. Boom. 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 Smoke enveloped the street. The student coughed, waving the smoke away, expecting to see a corpse. Instead, they saw a silhouette. Izuku stood there, dusting soot off his chest. His tank top was incinerated, revealing a torso of sculpted black diamond. Not a scratch. Are you okay? Izuku asked the student, his voice distorted and metallic. The student nodded dumbly. Izuku turned to the 3-pointer. The robot seemed to pause, its logic processor confused by the lack of damage. Izuku pulled his right arm back. The green lightning intensified, arcing wildly. He hardened his arm to its absolute limit, the black skin taking on a crystalline, translucent quality. Smash! He punched the air. The shockwave of One for All, amplified by the sheer mass of his fist, acted like a cannon blast. The air pressure alone crumpled the three-pointer, folding it in on itself until it was nothing but a ball of scrap metal. Whoa! The student whispered. Izuku checked the time. 2 minutes left. I only have 28 points. I need more. He ran off, leaving footprints in the asphalt. The 0-pointer. The ground began to shake. It wasn't a rumble. It was an earthquake. Windows shattered in the mock buildings. What is that? Someone screamed. From the central plaza, a metal hand the size of a house slammed onto the street, crushing a row of cars flat. Then, the head rose, a gargantuan, green-plated monstrosity that blocked out the sun. The 0-pointer. Panic ensued. The examinees turned and fled, a stampede of quirks running away from the overwhelming force. Run! It's huge! Forget the points. Just live. Izuku was running too. His logic dictated it. It's worth 0 points. There is no tactical advantage to engaging. Retreat is the only logical option. He turned to run. Ouch! The sound was faint over the grinding gears of the robot, but Izuku heard it. He looked back. Ochako Uraraka was trapped. She had fallen, and a massive piece of concrete debris had pinned her leg. She was struggling, her face pale, as the shadow of the 0-pointer loomed over her. The robot raised a colossal foot, ready to stomp the street into oblivion. Logic vanished. All Might's voice echoed in his head. The body moved before he could think. Izuku stopped running away. He turned around. Hey! Don't! Ida yelled as he ran past. You can't fight that. Izuku didn't hear him. He was doing math. Distance, 80 meters. Target height, 40 meters. Enemy mass, massive. My mass, variable. If he punched it, he would just bounce off. It was too big. He needed to pierce it. Izuku crouched low. He channeled One for All. Not 5%. Not 10%. He flooded his legs with 20%. His bones groaned, threatening to snap. Harden. He hardened his legs to diamond density to hold the structure together. He looked at the robot's face. One for All. He sprang. The street beneath him didn't just crack, it vaporized. A crater 5 meters wide exploded into existence as Izuku launched himself into the air. He was a black streak, a surface-to-air missile made of human will. He soared past the head of the robot. Not high enough. He needed to come down on it. He unhardened his back to reduce weight midair, keeping his momentum, then twisted his body. He was above the robot now, looking down at the green metal plating. He clenched his right fist. He hardened his entire right side, focusing every ounce of density into his knuckles. He became the heaviest object in the sky, adamant. Impact! He fell. Gravity One for All adamant density. He struck the 0-pointer dead center on top of its head. There was no resistance. Izuku didn't hit the robot, he went through it. Like a bullet through a soda can, Izuku pierced the thick armor plating, smashed through the internal circuitry, severed the main drive shaft, and shot out through the bottom of the robot's chassis. Explosions blossomed from the inside of the Titan. The massive machine groaned, tilted, and then collapsed backward with a thunderous crash. Izuku was plummeting toward the ground. His legs were screaming. The switch from 20% to freefall was disorienting. I'm falling. I can't land. I'm too heavy. If he hit the ground from this height in his hardened state, he would survive, but he would create a shockwave that might hurt Uraraka. If he unhardened, he would die. Slap. A hand struck his cheek. Suddenly, the world stopped spinning. He was floating. Uraraka, riding a piece of floating debris, had reached him. Her face was green with nausea. Release! She pressed her fingers together just as they neared the ground. Gravity returned. Izuku hardened his feet instinctively. They hit the ground, but the impact was manageable. However, the robot's collapse wasn't over. A massive slab of the building next to them, dislodged by the robot's fall, was tipping over. It was falling directly toward them. Uraraka was on the ground, exhausted, vomiting rainbows. She couldn't move. Izuku stood over her. He didn't have the strength to punch the building. He didn't have the leverage to throw it. He spread his arms wide. He took a deep breath. Adamant fortress. His skin turned vantablack. He pushed his density to the absolute maximum. He became a statue, an immovable object rooted to the earth. The building slab, tons of concrete and steel, crashed down on top of him. Crash. Dust billowed out, covering the entire street. Silence fell over the battle center. Did he just get crushed? A student whispered. Present Mick's voice buzzed. Time's up. The dust slowly began to settle. In the middle of the rubble, there was a mound of broken concrete. Then, the concrete shifted. A black, shiny shoulder emerged. Then a head. Izuku stood there, buried up to his waist in debris, holding a massive slab of concrete on his back like Atlas holding the sky. Beneath him, curled up in the small safe space his body had created, was Uraraka, safe and sound. Izuku grunted, his armor sparking as he heaved. He threw the slab aside with a thunderous crash. He looked down at Uraraka. His armor receded, revealing a face covered in dust and sweat, but smiling. Are you hurt? He asked. Uraraka shook her head, eyes wide. Izuku nodded. Then, his eyes rolled back in his head. The exhaustion of using adamant at max density combined with the OFA exertion caught up to him. He toppled over, face planting into the dirt with a heavy thud. The aftermath. Recovery girl sighed as she looked at Izuku in the infirmary bed. Well, she croaked, handing him a gummy. This is a first. Is it bad? Izuku asked, sitting up. He felt sore, like he'd run a marathon, but nothing was broken. No, she said, tapping her syringe against her chin. Usually, students come in here with broken arms, burns, lacerations. You have muscle fatigue and a mild case of dehydration. You fell from 40 meters, smashed a giant robot with your body, and had a building dropped on you. And you don't even have a bruise. She shook her head. You're a sturdy one, aren't you? Izuku smiled sheepishly. I try to be. Well, you're free to go. Though I suspect your friend in the next bed might want to thank you. Izuku looked over. Uraraka was sleeping, her leg bandaged. Izuku decided to let her rest. A week later, the letter arrived. Izuku sat at his desk, the envelope staring at him. He had counted his points. He had destroyed maybe 5 or 6 robots. That was roughly 20 points. It wasn't enough. The cutoff was usually higher. He ripped it open. A holographic disc fell out. All Might appeared, wearing a ridiculous yellow suit. I am here. As a projection, All Might explained the written exam, passed with flying colors. Then, the practical. You had 28 villain points, All Might said. A decent score, but perhaps not enough to secure a spot in Class 1A. Izuku's head dropped. I knew it. I was too slow. However, All Might shouted. A hero's job is not just to destroy villains. It is to save people. And how can a hero course reject someone who saves others at the risk of their own life? The video changed. It showed Uraraka in the teacher's lounge, pleading with Present Mike to give her points to the plain boy who saved me. You didn't just save her life, young Midoriya, All Might said, his voice soft. You acted as a shield. A bulwark against disaster. The screen displayed a scoreboard. Izuku Midoriya, villain points, 28, rescue points, 60, total, 88. 60 rescue points. Izuku gasped. Welcome, Izuku Midoriya, All Might said, reaching a hand out toward the screen. You have found your own way to use this power. Not as a sword, but as a shield that strikes back. Welcome to your hero academia. Izuku wiped the tears from his eyes. His hand resting on the desk, hardened unconsciously, turning into a fist of diamond. He was in. The immovable object had started to move. The uniform of Uehai felt lighter than it looked. The gray blazer with the teal stripes was prestigious, a fabric symbol that screamed elite, but to Izuku Midoriya, it felt fragile. He moved carefully as he adjusted the tie in the mirror, mindful of his own strength. Since inheriting one for all 10 months ago, his baseline density had increased even when he wasn't actively hardening. He felt grounded, heavy, like a deep-sea anchor trying to walk on dry land. Izuku! You're going to be late. His mother called from the kitchen. Coming, He grabbed his yellow backpack. He paused at the door, looking at his red sneakers. They were custom reinforced now, the soles lined with a flexible titanium weave to prevent him from grinding them into dust simply by walking. He stepped out into the world. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. It was the first day of the rest of his life. The hallways of Yui were cavernous, built to accommodate students of all shapes and sizes. Izuku navigated them with a map clutched in his hand, his heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. Class 1A. The hero course. He found the door. It was massive, easily 10 feet tall, designed for giants. Izuku stared at the bold red 1A painted on the metal. This was the barrier. Behind this door lay the people who would define his generation. Please don't let him be in my class. Please let it be a peaceful high school life. He slid the door open. Remove your foot from the desk. It is an insult to the upperclassmen and the craftsmen who built it. Ha! Stop buzzing in my ear, Four Eyes. What junior high are you from anyway? Izuku froze. The nightmare scenario was real. Tenya Ida, the stiff, bespectacled boy from the entrance exam, was chopping the air in front of Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo sat with his feet propped up on the desk, a scowl etched permanently onto his face. I am from semi-private academy. My name is Tenya Ida. Sama? A stuck-up elite, huh? I'll have fun crushing you. Crushing? You're terrible. Do you really want to be a hero? Izuku sighed. Maybe if I walk in quietly. Oh. It's you! Ida spun around, spotting Izuku in the doorway. The tension in the room shifted instantly. Every eye turned to the newcomer, the heavy student. Ida marched over, his movements robotic. Good morning. I am Tenya Ida. I heard, Izuku stammered. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya, Ida nodded solemnly. I must apologize. During the entrance exam, I misjudged you. I thought you were analyzing the situation, but I failed to realize your quirk was a specialized heavy armor type suited for direct confrontation. Your destruction of the zero-pointer was structurally significant. Structurally significant? Izuku laughed nervously. I guess that's one way to put it. Hey! It's Deku! Ochako Uraraka popped up from behind Ida, beaming. You made it! I'm so glad! I asked President Mike about your points, but it turns out you didn't even need my help. That punch was amazing. You were like K-Pow, and then the robot was like Crunch. She mimed a punch, nearly hitting Ida in the chest. Oh, thanks, Uraraka-san, Izuku blushed. He wasn't used to praise. He was used to being called a pebble. TCH. A sharp sound cut through the pleasantries. Bakugo was glaring at them. Don't get ahead of yourself, Deku. You just got lucky that the robot was a giant target. You're still just a sitting duck. The air grew cold. The other students watched, sensing the history there. If you're here to make friends, pack up and leave. The voice came from the floor. Izuku looked down. Lying in a yellow sleeping bag, looking for all the world like a magnificent, exhaustion-ridden caterpillar, was a man with messy black hair and bloodshot eyes. He sucked on a jelly pouch with the enthusiasm of a man on death row. The class shrieked. Something's in the sleeping bag. The man unzipped the bag and stood up, scratching his stubble. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down. Time is a limited resource. You lot aren't very rational, are you? He stepped out of the bag, revealing a jagged, worn-out hero costume. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Homeroom teacher? The class gasped in unison. Put these on, Aizawa said, pulling a blue gym uniform out of his sleeping bag and tossing it at Izuku. And meet me on the P grounds. The locker room was a flurry of activity as the boys changed. It was the first real chance to see the quirks of his classmates up close. There was a guy with elbows that looked like tape dispensers, a boy with a bird head, and a very short boy who was practically drooling over a hole in the wall. Izuku pulled off his shirt. Whoa, dude! You're ripped! Izuku turned. A boy with spiky red hair and a jagged scar over his right eye was grinning at him. He pointed at Izuku's chest. That's some serious muscle. I mean, I train, but you look like you're made of solid rock. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. Well, my quirk increases my density, so my muscle fibers are naturally tighter than average. It makes me a bit heavy. Density? The redhead's eyes lit up. He hardened his own arm. His skin turned rocky, jagged and sharp, with a reddish hue. I'm Eijiro Kirishima. My quirk is hardening. We're practically quirk cousins. Izuku's eyes widened. Hardening? That's amazing. Let me see. He leaned in, his fanbow mode activating. He poked Kirishima's arm. It was rough like granite. Incredible. The texture provides abrasive damage potential. It looks like sedimentary deposition but stronger. Go ahead, show me yours. Kirishima urged, flexing. Izuku nodded. He took a breath and activated adamant, shinning. The sound was distinct, a smooth, metallic resonance. Izuku's skin didn't become jagged. It turned into a seamless, oil-slick black surface that reflected the fluorescent lights of the locker room. It looked less like rock and more like polished obsidian or hypercompressed carbon. Kirishima gasped. He knocked his knuckles against Izuku's chest. Clink. Clink. It sounded like hitting a vault door. So manly. Kirishima shouted, tears of admiration forming in his eyes. It's so smooth. And hard. My hardening has a limit to how much damage it can take before it cracks. But yours feels like it could stop a tank shell. It has its downsides, Izuku said, unhardening. I get really heavy. And I'm not very fast. Who cares about speed when you're a walking fortress? Kirishima slapped Izuku on the back. We gotta stick together, man. The Hardening Brothers. Hardening Brothers? Izuku smiled. It was a terrible name, but he liked it. Sure. From the corner of the room, Bakugo slammed his locker shut. The metal dented under his grip. He didn't say a word, but the heat radiating from him was palpable. The pea grounds were vast, an open expanse of dirt and track under the harsh sun. Aizawa stood with a clipboard, looking bored. A quirk apprehension test? The class echoed. But what about the entrance ceremony? The guidance counselor meeting? Uraraka asked. If you're going to be a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events, Aizawa drawled. UA is known for its freestyle educational traditions. That applies to the teachers as well. He looked over the students, his gaze lingering on Izuku for a moment. Softball throw. Standing long jump. 50-meter dash. Endurance running. Grip strength. Upper body training. Seated toe touch. Sit-ups. You did these in middle school without quirks. Today you use your quirks. He turned to Bakugo. Bakugo, you finished first in the entrance exam. What was your softball throw record in junior high? 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. Try it with your quirk. Anything goes as long as you stay in the circle. Bakugo stepped into the circle. He stretched his arms, a predatory grin spreading across his face. Dumb test. I'll just blast it. He wound up. Die. Boom. The explosion propelled the ball like a missile. It soared through the air, leaving a smoke trail, before landing far in the distance. Aizawa held up a device. 705.2 meters. Whoa! Over 700 meters? Kaminari, the electric boy, cheered. We can use our quirks as much as we want? This is gonna be awesome. Mina Ishido, the pink girl, squealed. Aizawa's expression darkened. The air temperature seemed to drop. Awesome, huh? He lowered the device. You have 3 years to become heroes. You think it's going to be all fun and games? Idiots. He swept his hair back, his eyes narrowing. Right then. New rule. The student who ranks last in total points will be judged to have no potential and will be immediately expelled. The silence was deafening. Expelled? Uraraka cried. But it's the first day. That's not fair. Natural disasters aren't fair, Aizawa retorted. Villain attacks aren't fair. Catastrophic accidents aren't fair. Heroes are the ones who correct that unfairness. If you wanted to hang out at Mickey D's after school, you came to the wrong place. He pointed a finger at them. Welcome to the Department of Heroics. Izuku swallowed hard. He looked at his hands. Last place gets expelled. He did the math quickly in his head. I have raw power, but my mobility without preparation is terrible. The dash, the sidesteps, the distance run, those are my enemies. If I harden, I get heavy. If I don't harden, I'm just a fit teenager with no speed quirk. He looked at Aizawa. The teacher was watching him. Aizawa had seen the entrance exam footage. He knew Izuku was a powerhouse, but he also likely suspected Izuku was a one-trick pony. He expects me to fail the agility tests. I have to prove I'm not just a paperweight. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Ida and Azuri were up first. Ida clocked in at 3.04 seconds. Azuri did 5.58. Then it was Izuku's turn. He was paired against Bakugo. Don't get in my dust, Deku, Bakugo sneered, sparks popping on his palms. On your marks. Izuku crouched. He couldn't use full cowl yet. He couldn't control the output well enough for a short sprint without destroying the track and disqualifying himself. But he could use propulsion. Harden the legs. Dig in. Start. Bakugo launched himself backward with explosions, flying down the track. Izuku hardened his feet and calves, increasing their density to max. He stomped down, cracking the starting block, and shoved off with explosive force. It was a burst of speed, but the moment he was in the air, the weight of his hardened legs dragged him down. He was fighting his own physics. He was a Ferrari engine inside a dump truck. Bakugo crossed the line. 4.13 seconds. Izuku thundered across the line a moment later, the ground shaking with each stride. 7.02 seconds. The robot announced. Izuku panted, unhardening his legs. 7 seconds wasn't bad for a normal human, but in this class? It was slow. Too heavy, Aizawa muttered, making a note. Momentum is high, but acceleration is sluggish. Test 2, grip strength. This was where Izuku could shine. He took the dynamometer. Beside him, a tall boy with multiple arms, Shoji, squeezed his device. 540 kilograms. Whoa! The class gasped. Izuku took a deep breath. Harden, forearm and hand. His arm turned black. The metal handle of the device creaked. He didn't just squeeze, he condensed his hand, the molecules becoming infinitely denser. The machine groaned. Crunch. The device didn't just display a number. It crumbled. The plastic casing shattered, and the internal spring snapped into pieces. Dust poured from Izuku's hand. Izuku looked at Aizawa. It broke. Aizawa sighed. That was the reinforced one. 600 kilograms is the max reading. I'll just mark it as off the charts. Kirishima cheered. That's my bro. Crushing it. Test 3, standing long jump. This was a disaster. Izuku tried to use one for all to boost his jump. He hardened his legs to take the force. He launched beautifully, clearing the sandbox entirely. However, landing was the issue. A normal long jump requires grace. Izuku was an anvil dropped from a window. He hit the ground past the sandpit. Boom! He created a crater 2 feet deep in the dirt track. Debris flew everywhere. Cleared the distance, the robot beeped. You're destroying my field, Midoriya, Aizawa said, sounding tired. Sorry, sir. I sink. Test 4, repeated sidesteps. Mineta, the small boy with great balls on his head, was bouncing back and forth like a pinball. Infinity. Look at me go. Izuku stepped up. Left. Right. Left. Right. He tried to be fast, but every time he changed direction, his inertia fought him. If he hardened to push off harder, he got heavier and slower. If he stayed soft, he lacked the explosive power. He moved clumsily, his shoes squeaking in protest. Result, below average. Izuku wiped sweat from his brow. This is bad. I'm dominating the strength tests, but I'm tanking the mobility ones. I need a huge score on the ball throw to balance the average. Test 5, the ball throw. Uraraka went up and threw the ball. It floated. And floated. Infinity, Aizawa announced. Infinity? The class screamed. That's cheating. It's incredible, Izuku muttered. If I can get a score like that. Midoriya, Aizawa called. You're up. Izuku walked to the circle. He picked up the ball. It felt tiny in his hand. He looked at the field. 705 meters to beat. I need to use one for all. But I can't just use 100% like I did with the robot, or I'll create a shockwave that might hurt the others. But if I use 5%, The weight of my arm will limit the throw distance. He had to find the balance. Harden the arm to 50%. Use 20% OFA. Snap the wrist. He wound up. Green lightning crackled. His arm turned a dark gray. Smash! He threw. The ball left his hand, and flopped onto the ground about 50 meters away. Huh! Izuku blinked. His arm hadn't hurt. But the power, it had vanished right at the moment of release. The lightning had cut out. His hardening had dissolved into soft skin. I erased your quirk. Izuku turned. Aizawa stood there, his hair floating upward, his scarf defying gravity. His eyes glowed a menacing red. That entrance exam, Aizawa said, his voice low and dangerous. It wasn't rational. You have a quirk that makes you nearly indestructible. A walking tank. Aizawa walked closer, invading Izuku's personal space. But a tank that cannot move is just a bunker. You rely on your durability to soak up damage, but in the field, simply not dying isn't enough. If you can't reach the victim in time because you're too heavy, they die. If you can't catch the villain because you're slow, they escape. He deactivated his quirk. His hair fell. You have enormous power tucked away in that armor of yours. But right now, you look like a tool that only knows how to be a hammer. Are you planning to just stand there and let the villains break their hands on you for the next 3 years? Izuku clenched his fist. The words stung because they were the same fears he had harbored for years. Am I just a rock? No, Izuku said firmly. Aizawa raised an eyebrow. I'm not a hammer, Izuku said, picking up the ball again. And I'm not just a shield. He stepped back into the circle. He thinks I'm relying on defense. He thinks I'm scared to move. Izuku looked at the sky. All Might said I was the perfect vessel. Not because I can take a hit, but because I can hold the power. Don't hold back. Don't worry about the weight. Use the weight. Izuku widened his stance. He breathed in. He focused on his right arm. Adamant, maximum density. His arm turned vantablack instantly. It became translucent, like a dark diamond. The air around it seemed to warp from the sheer mass concentration. Then, he summoned one for all. Not 5%. Not 20%. 100%. The red veins of one for all traced glowing lines across the diamond surface of his arm. The energy screamed, looking for an exit. A normal arm would explode. Izuku's arm simply hummed with the vibration of a containment field. He didn't need to be fast. He just needed to be a cannon. He whipped his arm forward. The weight of his diamond fist generated immense centrifugal force. Smash! KRKOM. The sound was deafening. It wasn't a whoosh, it was a sonic boom. A ring of dust expanded outward from the circle, knocking Mineta and Aoyama off their feet. The ball didn't fly, it vanished. It tore a hole through the cloud layer above them. Izuku stood there, his arms smoking. The heat from the friction of the air against his hardened skin was intense, turning his obsidian arm a glowing cherry red. It hissed like hot iron in water. It hurt. It felt like a bad sunburn. But it wasn't broken. Aizawa stared at the sky, his hair blown back by the wind pressure. He looked at his device. The number kept climbing. And climbing. It beeped. Aizawa turned the screen to the class. 1,204 meters. He broke a kilometer? Kaminari whispered. Izuku unhardened his arm. He shook it, wincing slightly as the heat dissipated. He looked at Aizawa, his green eyes burning with determination. I can move, sensei, Izuku said, clutching his aching but intact fist. I'm still standing. Aizawa's lips curled up into a terrifying grin. This kid, he didn't hold back to save his body. He used his body to amplify the power. Rational, Aizawa muttered. Very rational. DKU. An explosion ripped through the stunned silence. Bakugo was charging. His eyes were white with rage. What the hell was that? Bakugo screamed, propelling himself forward with blasts. You didn't just harden. You threw that like All Might. Since when do you have a strength quirk? You lied to me. He was fast. He was going to kill him. Izuku didn't flinch. He hardened his chest, preparing for the impact. Flip. A scarf wrapped around Bakugo's chest. He slammed to a halt, gagging. His explosions died out. What the? This cloth is stiff. It's a capture weapon made of carbon fiber and a special metal alloy, Aizawa said, holding the other end of the scarf. His eyes were red again. Stand down. Using quirks against students without permission is grounds for suspension. But he... Bakugo thrashed, looking at Izuku with a mixture of betrayal and fury. I didn't lie, Kaken, Izuku said quietly. I just grew. Aizawa yanked Bakugo back. Stop wasting my time. Next test. The rest of the tests passed in a blur. Izuku did average on the sit-ups, his torso was heavy, and the toe-touch armor isn't flexible. But the impression of the ball throw hung over the class. Finally, the sun began to set. The students gathered around Aizawa for the results. I'm not going to verbalize the scores. It's a waste of time. Just look at the projection. A hologram popped up. 1. Momo Yaoyorozu. 2. Shoto Todoroki. 3. Katsuki Bakugo. 4. Tenya Ida. 8. Eijiro Kurishima. 9. Izuku Midoriya. 20. Minoru Mineta. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. 9th place. Solidly in the middle. His monstrous strength scores had balanced out his abysmal agility scores. Midoriya! Kirishima grabbed his shoulder. Top 10. We're right next to each other. Hardening brothers for the win. Yeah, Izuku smiled weakly. That was close. He looked at the bottom of the list. Mineta was shaking, tears streaming down his face. I'm expelled. The great boy sobbed. Aizawa clicked a button, and the screen vanished. By the way, the expulsion thing was a lie. Huh? The class screamed. It was a logical ruse to draw out your maximum potential, Aizawa said with a straight face. That was obviously a lie. Yaoyorozu, the tall girl with the ponytail, said confidently. It was clear from the start. No, it wasn't, Izuku thought, clutching his chest. He was absolutely serious. Aizawa turned to walk away. Pick up a syllabus in the classroom. Midoriya, go to the nurse and get some burn cream for that arm. You smell like grilled steak. Yes, sir. As the class walked back to the main building, the atmosphere was lighter. They had survived the first day. Midoriya-kun. Ida marched up to him. That throw was magnificent. I must ask, is your density control linked to your emotional state? The output seemed to fluctuate. And your finger? Uraraka chimed in. Or, well, your whole arm. It was glowing red. Was it hot? Yeah, a little, Izuku laughed. My quirk absorbs kinetic energy, but thermal energy is harder to dissipate. Air friction at supersonic speeds creates a lot of heat. Supersonic. Uraraka stared at him with stars in her eyes. So cool. Izuku looked around. He saw Kirishima giving him a thumbs up. He saw Ada analyzing his gait. He saw Uraraka smiling. And he saw Bakugo walking far ahead, hands in his pockets, surrounded by a dark aura that promised violence. He hates me more than ever now, Izuku thought. Because I'm not just a pebble anymore. I'm a boulder in his path. He clenched his fist. The burn cream would soothe the skin, but the fire inside him was just getting started. I'm really here, he whispered to himself. I'm a hero student. Did you say something, Deku-kun? Uraraka asked. Just. I'm hungry, Izuku grinned. Me too. Let's get tonkatsu. Rational, Ida agreed. Proteins are essential for recovery. As they walked into the sunset, the shadow of UA stretched long over them. Inside the staff room window, All Might watched them go. You're a harsh one, Aizawa-kun, All Might murmured. You didn't expel anyone. They have potential, Aizawa said, dropping into his chair. Especially that armored kid. He's got zero finesse. He's clumsy. He's slow. But, Aizawa looked at the data on his computer screen. The 1,200-meter throw. He doesn't break. And in this line of work, durability is the one thing you can't teach. Aizawa grinned. He might just become the pillar this society is losing. The locker room smelled of new rubber and nervous sweat. It was a scent Izuku Midoriya was quickly becoming accustomed to. He stood in front of the long mirror, adjusting the straps of his costume. Unlike the sleek, spandex-heavy designs of his classmates, Izuku's hero suit was industrial. It was built for mass. The base was a dark green, fire-resistant reinforced weave, thick enough to be mistaken for ballistic armor. On his knees and elbows were heavy, plated guards made of a titanium alloy, designed to support his joints when his density skyrocketed. His boots were the centerpiece, massive, steel-toed stompers with hydraulic shock absorbers built into the heels to prevent him from shattering his own ankles or the pavement with every step. He pulled on his mask, a simple metal respirator that covered his nose and mouth, stylized with a wide, toothy grin reminiscent of All Might, but colored in a dark, gunmetal gray. "Whoa, Midoriya!" Eijiro Kirishima walked by shirtless, his red hair spiked to defy gravity. He was wearing gear that exposed his chest, showing off his own jagged hardening quirk. "That suit is intense. You look like a riot squad." Izuku turned, his heavy boots clanking on the tile. "Thanks, Kirishima-kun. I requested extra reinforcement on the soles. When I go full adamant, I weigh nearly half a ton. Regular shoes just explode." "Half a ton?" Kirishima whistled. "That is so manly. I just get jagged. You turn into a literal anchor." "It has its drawbacks," Izuku muttered, flexing his gloved hands. "I can't exactly sneak around." "Who needs sneaking when you can walk through walls?" Kirishima laughed, slapping him on the back. "Let's go. All Might is waiting." Izuku took a deep breath. "All Might is watching. I can't be a pebble today. I have to be the mountain." Ground Beta. The class gathered in a darkened tunnel, the bright sunlight at the end beckoning them. Standing there, hands on his hips, his cape fluttering in a wind that seemed to exist only for him, was All Might. "I am here!" he bellowed, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Coming through the door like a hero, the class cheered. Seeing the number one hero in the flesh, wearing his Silver Age costume, was enough to make even the stoic Todoroki look twice. "Welcome to the battle trial," All Might announced, producing a script from his pocket. "Today, we step away from simple physical tests and move into the realm of combat. Villain scenarios. 2 teams, indoor battles." He explained the rules. Heroes must capture the nuclear weapon or the villains within the time limit. Villains must protect the weapon or capture the heroes. "Now let's draw lots." Izuku watched the screen shuffle. His heart pounded. "Please don't be Kakin. Please don't be Kakin." Team A, Izuku Midoriya Ochako Uraraka. Team D, Katsuki Bakugo Tenya Ida. Izuku felt his stomach drop all the way to his heavy boots. Fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. "Whoa, Deku-kun! We're teammates again!" Uraraka cheered, pumping a fist. She looked adorable in her pink and black spacesuit, which looked puffy and rounded to match her zero-gravity theme. "It's fate!" "Yeah," Izuku swallowed, his eyes drifting across the crowd to meet a pair of burning red irises. "Fate." Bakugo wasn't yelling. He wasn't throwing a tantrum. He was staring at Izuku with a quiet, vibrating intensity that was infinitely more terrifying. He dragged a finger across his throat. "Team A will be the heroes," All Might shouted. "Team D will be the villains. Everyone else, to the monitoring room." The setup. The building was a 5-story concrete skeleton. It was gritty, industrial, and tight, a nightmare for someone with a large, clumsy quirk, but a playground for someone with explosive mobility. Inside the weapon room on the 5th floor, Ida was getting into character. "I am the ultimate evil," Ida declared, adjusting his glasses. He began clearing the room of loose objects. "Bakugo-kun, we must fortify our position. Midoriya's quirk gives him immense crushing power. If he reaches this floor, he could simply destabilize the support pillars and bring the ceiling down on us." Bakugo stood by the door, his back to the bomb. He was gauntlet, his grenade-shaped bracers gleaming ominously. "He won't reach this floor," Bakugo said quietly. "We cannot underestimate him. His physical defense is—" "Shut up, Four Eyes," Bakugo growled. He turned, his face a mask of concentrated malice. "That nerd, he's been laughing at me. Pretending to be a bug while hiding a tank under his skin. I'm going to crush him." "Bakugo, the mission is to protect the weapon." "I don't care about the weapon," Bakugo said, walking out the door. "I'm going hunting." Outside, Izuku and Uraraka studied the blueprints. "Okay," Izuku said, his voice shaking slightly before he slapped his cheeks to steady himself. "Uraraka-san, listen. We're up against Kaken and Ida-kun. Ida is fast and diligent. He'll likely stay with the bomb and fortify the room. And Bakugo? Uraraka asked. He's coming for me, Izuku said with absolute certainty. He doesn't care about the test. He cares about beating me. He feels insulted that I hid my power from him. Izuku looked at the building. I'm the bait, Izuku stated. I'm slow. If I try to chase Ida, he'll outmaneuver me. But Kaken, he'll want a head-on collision. I'll draw his fire. While I keep him occupied, you use your zero-gravity to float up the outside or sneak past us to the weapon room. But Deku-kun, Uraraka looked worried. Bakugo is scary. And his explosions, even if you're hard, won't it hurt? Izuku tapped his chest plate. A metallic clink responded. Pain isn't the problem, Izuku said softly. I've been hit by him for 10 years. The difference is, today, I don't have to fall down. Start. All Might's voice blared over the loudspeakers. The encounter. Izuku and Uraraka entered through a first-floor window. The interior was dim, a maze of concrete corridors and pillars. They moved quietly, or as quietly as Izuku could manage. Every step was a heavy thud-thud, vibrating slightly through the floorboards. Sneaking isn't really an option for me, Izuku whispered apologetically. It's okay. It sounds intimidating. Uraraka whispered back. They reached the second-floor hallway. It was long, narrow, and lined with pillars. Get back! Izuku suddenly yelled, shoving Uraraka behind a pillar. Boom! From around the corner, a figure exploded into view. Bakugo flew through the air, propelled by blasts from his palms, moving faster than a human should be able to in such a confined space. DKU! He didn't stop. He didn't hesitate. He was a missile. In the original timeline, Izuku would have dodged. He would have analyzed the trajectory and rolled away. But this Izuku was different. He knew his agility was garbage compared to Bakugo's flight. If he tried to dodge, he would be caught by the blast wave and knocked off balance. Don't dodge. Endure. Izuku stepped forward, planting his feet wide, adamant, chest and face. The transformation was instant. The black, glossy sheen rippled up his neck and over his face like venom from a symbiote. He lowered his head, tucking his chin. Bakugo reached him. He swung his right arm. A massive explosion charged in his palm. Die! The explosion detonated point-blank against Izuku's face. The force was immense. The windows in the hallway shattered outward. Smoke filled the corridor instantly. In the monitoring room, the class gasped. A direct hit! Kaminari shouted. Is he crazy? He didn't even try to move. Bakugo is ruthless, Tsuyu croaked. That could kill him. No, Kirishima said, leaning forward, his eyes glued to the screen. Watch. The smoke began to clear. Bakugo had landed in a crouch a few meters away, grinning maniacally, expecting to see Izuku writhing on the ground with burns. But the silhouette in the smoke was still standing. Izuku hadn't moved an inch. His feet had sunk 2 inches into the concrete floor, cracking the tiles in a spiderweb pattern, anchoring him in place. His face was pitch black, the adamant armor reflecting the dim emergency lights. Smoke curled off his skin, but there was no burn. No blister. Just a smooth, impenetrable surface. Izuku slowly unhardened his eyes, the black receding just enough to reveal the emerald-green irises staring dead at Bakugo. Is that all, Kaken? Izuku asked, his voice distorted and deep, resonating through his hardened throat. Bakugo's grin faltered. His eye twitched. You! It was the ultimate insult. Bakugo had thrown his best opening move, a shot that would have knocked out a pro, and Izuku had taken it like a gentle breeze. You ignored me, Bakugo whispered, his voice shaking with rage. You looked down on me. I didn't look down on you, Izuku said, taking a heavy step forward. Thud. I just stopped looking up. Don't mock me. Bakugo launched himself again. This time, he didn't stop at one hit. He unleashed a barrage. Right hook. Blast. Left kick. Blast. Uppercut. Blast. It was a storm of fire and kinetic force. Bakugo danced around Izuku, attacking from every angle, above, behind, the sides. The hallway lit up like a strobe light show of destruction. Izuku stood in the center of the storm. He couldn't catch Bakugo. Every time he swung his fist, Bakugo was already gone, propelled by an explosion. Izuku was too slow, so he stopped trying to hit back. He crossed his arms over his chest and hunkered down. He became a fortress. Clang. Boom. Thud. Crack. Bakugo's attacks pinged off Izuku's armor. Why won't you fall? Bakugo screamed, blasting Izuku in the back of the knee. Izuku's knee buckled slightly, but instantly hardened to maximum density, freezing the joint in place. He absorbed the kinetic energy. He's getting faster, Izuku analyzed calmly from inside his shell. His sweat is increasing. The explosions are getting stronger. My armor is heating up. Izuku's skin was glowing a dull, angry red. The heat transfer was the real danger. While he couldn't be broken, he could be cooked. The air inside his lungs was getting hot. Uraraka-san, go! Izuku yelled through the chaos. Uraraka, who had been watching in terrified awe from behind a pillar, snapped to attention. Right. She tapped herself, floating, and scrambled toward the stairs while Bakugo was fixated on his punching bag. Bakugo noticed her out of the corner of his eye. Don't think so, round face. He turned to blast her. Now, Izuku dropped his guard. He couldn't catch Bakugo, but he could intercept him. He lunged. It wasn't a run, it was a tackle. He threw his entire body weight, which was currently pushing 600 pounds due to his density, into the path of Bakugo's movement. Bakugo tried to pivot, but he clipped Izuku's shoulder. Crunch. It was like hitting a bollard on the highway. Bakugo spun out of control, crashing into a concrete pillar. The wind was knocked out of him. Go! Izuku roared. Uraraka disappeared up the stairs. The stalemate. Bakugo picked himself up from the rubble. He spat blood. He looked at Izuku, who was standing in the middle of the wrecked hallway, steam rising from his black shoulders. You're just a distraction, Bakugo spat. You know you can't beat me. You're too slow. You're just a glorified doorstop. If being a doorstop lets my team win, Izuku panted, the heat beginning to make him dizzy, then I'll be the best doorstop in the world. I'll melt you down, Bakugo growled. I'll keep hitting you until you turn to slag. He came in again. This time, he aimed low. He blasted the floor beneath Izuku's feet. The concrete shattered. Izuku lost his footing, stumbling into the hole. Bakugo used the opening. He flew above Izuku, grabbed his head with both hands, and unleashed a dual-palm explosion directly onto Izuku's cranium. Kaboom! The floor collapsed. Izuku fell through to the first floor, crashing into a pile of debris. Bakugo landed on the edge of the hole, looking down. Stay down, Deku. In the dust below, two glowing green eyes opened. Izuku climbed out of the rubble. His costume was tattered, the green fabric burned away to reveal the black, diamond-hard skin beneath. He shook his head, clearing the ringing in his ears. He looked up at Bakugo. And he smiled. It wasn't a hero's smile. It was the smile of someone who knew they couldn't be hurt. Is that the best you've got? Izuku taunted. He needed to keep Bakugo here. If Bakugo went up to help Ida, Uraraka would lose. He had to be the most annoying object in the universe. Bakugo's face twisted into something demonic. You want my best?